Brian, man, so glad you're here. You've got a lot going on in Lewisburg, Tennessee. You've got, 8 houses on the go right now.
Yeah, we have, something like that. Sometimes I can't keep track, but
Yeah,
I have to pull up the system and look.
And you typically don't do small projects. You've got eight significant projects probably going.
Thankfully, not as many as we used to have as far as the scope.
Yeah.
This year has kind of ushered in some projects where we didn't have as intense. Thankfully, then we got one right now that's pretty big. It's pretty gnarly.
Yeah.
It's not a big house, but we did some substantial work.
Yeah.
And
you've gotten into some new construction projects as well, right?
Yep. We have one that's about to go out the door this week coming up, as far as being sold, and we have one that is ready for paint.
Yeah.
So
it's just so cool to see all the different things you're doing, how your business has grown in the past 5 years from zero to now. You're got so many different kinds of projects going, and you're living the life of a full-time real estate investor.
Right.
Take us, help me paint a picture of what that life looks like. 'Cause there's so many people that they want, that's what they want. That's what they want to be doing full time.
Right.
But I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what that looks like. So take us into your life in a typical day, a typical week.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that because, we've had a lot of people reach out over the last 5 years. Even, before New Again, when we were doing our first flip before we found New Again, people were calling how do we, get involved, and we want to flip houses and all that stuff. And I was like, I don't know if I don't know if you know what it really looks like, and you do, so you understand what I'm saying, because you've had the same probably experience over the last dozen plus years, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I've actually had people out on ride-alongs to see a day in the life, and then many of them have been they never went further than that.
What surprises them?
I don't know. I've never actually had that question to them, but my thought is that they probably went, "Oh, this isn't anything like what it's like on TV."
Yeah.
I mean, 22 minutes later, you watching that show and they're done and they make, $80,000 and move on, right?
Right.
That's not what it's about at all. So for me, a day in the life, I wake up, I run pretty much every aspect of the business with, some really great support team. Our ecosystem that we call it, right?
Yep.
Is, the two key players are my agent, my real estate agent, and my general contractor, right? So I'm on the phone with them daily, usually. For sure, my contractor, Nick's, and he's one of my best friends too. So we were friends before this, albeit brief, but our friendship has, blossomed through the last, 5 years. So I'm on the phone with them a lot. I get up in the morning. One of the first things I do, honestly, I get up, kind of knock out some accounting stuff, some of the tedious, boring stuff. And then it just starts to go from there. Within the first hour or two, things just start, okay, hey, I got to do this, got to do that. You got to order, hey, we got to pick out tile for this house. We got to order vanities for this house. When are photos going to be, I'm getting texts, when photos are. So it's just literally, it just starts to snowball. And then all of a sudden it's 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever. And I'm I have to have a hard stop at some point. So usually I cut it because you can, as you know, you could just keep going.
And every day is different, right?
Oh yeah.
And the more you do, the more, I think the more you do and the more you're capable of doing, the more opportunities there are. So it just keeps coming. More opportunity keeps coming your direction.
Right.
How have you dealt with that? how have you managed that over the growth of your business?
Yeah.
Do you have boundaries, or do you look at every opportunity?
I would say over the last couple of years, I've probably been more discerning.
Yeah.
About, what are we going to do next?
Over the life of your business, the things you spend time on, I think, have changed. Because I know when you started this business 4 or 5 years ago, you were in the projects, right? Like you were on the job sites,
Heavily,
really hands on. Yep. And today you're doing more acquisitions, leading rather than being there present.
Yeah.
Tell me how that came to, like, how did that change? Like, was that a mental adjustment you made, or is it just out of necessity?
I think it's more mental for me because, I've the traditional kind of self-employed mentality, right? Like if it's going to be done right, it's going to be, you got to do it yourself type thing. And the truth is, to grow a big business, something that's going to, that you don't have to be watching 24/7, which I still do that a lot, but you have to be able to lean on people and trust and delegate and I'm I'm learning how to do that better. So
it's not natural to your personality,
Nope.
right? So that's a growth.
Yeah, I just want to take the reins and go, and just try and be everything, all at once. And you just can't. You can do it on a small scale, but you can't scale your business big. You just can't.
Right. I remember you had a death in the family at some point a couple years ago, and it forced you to be away for a while. And I remember you talking about that being like a trigger to change the way you approach the business.
Now, the good part was, like Nick said, I got you. You know, and don't worry about it. Take care of your family. And we were gone for like 11, 12 days, just.
And the machine didn't stop.
It didn't stop. I brought my computer. So anything that was real important, like getting people paid and stuff like that, I always want to make sure that happens. It's really important. So I brought that and made that happen, and, but other than that, like everything kept going. We got back and it was what it was.
Yeah.
We had a great year too.
You came from a very different industry, like the car business. Back in California, and everything in that business is urgent, right? Like every call is like urgent. And you transition to this business. Are there things about real estate that you appreciate more than most because you were in a pretty tough, fast-paced business before?
Sure. Yeah. And I worked for a few really great owners, and I worked for some really poor operators. Just really poor. I didn't understand it at the time because I was just, most of the time I was selling cars. Then I started to move up into management. Then I was realizing what was going on. Like these guys were cutting my buddy's pay and stuff. Like he brought this whole team and turned the thing around. Well, then I started to do that when I got to the level of management, and I experienced it firsthand, and I was just like, what are these people doing? I grew up in a business with my dad where I watched him be more than generous to his guys, took care of his guys like family. Yeah. And I knew that was how you win in business. Take care of the people that take care of you. Right. And so going into a business where these people did not care, literally, and they would forget. Their memories were so short of who was doing what for them. Yeah. And so I couldn't relate to that.
Transactional. The car business is a transactional business.
Very much so.
Right. But a lot of businesses are transactional businesses. And that's something that I've noticed from you is like, it seems like your why is not necessarily about the money. Like you're doing well with this business, but I've never sensed that that's the why.
100%. Yeah.
it seems to me like it is the relationships. The relationships are the why.
Yeah. I always wanted to be, from the time I was a kid, I wanted to own my own business, number one.
Yeah.
I remember I was in concrete cutting with my dad, and I had this saw blade, one of those big concrete saw blades.
Uh-huh.
And I remember doing a report when I was like third grade or something about how I was going to, be own my own concrete cutting company like my dad.
Uh-huh.
Which I did. 2003, I owned
Yeah.
my own concrete cutting company. So I did check that box, right? And so I always knew I wanted to do that. I also knew at a young age that I was interested in real estate because my parents had owned multiple properties and stuff at times. And so I was watching, like, hey, and I just knew. And then I had a very close friend. She's like a sister to me in the 90s that was flipping 15, 20 houses in a year when there wasn't a flipping show, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they hadn't christened it flipping.
Mm-hmm.
So she was doing it when it wasn't popular,
Yep.
and she did it at a high level. And
Yep.
I was like, that's what I want to do right there. So that was probably 1998 is when I actually got the bug.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
So you mentioned the ecosystem, and you add a lot of value with construction, and I want to dig deep into one of the houses that you've done and see that. But that requires building an ecosystem, and you've done that, and your ecosystem is really solid. Tell me about that, and like how you manage that. Is that a like a week in the life in terms of what that looks like? How do you manage that ecosystem?
Yeah. Well, early on, it was it was important to be hands-on, number one, because basically I was the project manager. We didn't have general contractors in the beginning, they were aspiring.
Yeah.
Definitely had like Nick had the knowledge. He just hadn't gone through the whole process. So, and that was the cool thing is organically, from within, Nick, grew into the role, became a full-fledged general contractor. He was an electrical, he had his contractor's license for being an electrician first, and then of course went full-fledged. And then we had another contractor who, worked within our system, and with Dirk, Paul, they worked, all the way up till now. And he's a general contractor now too.
Yeah.
So, which was part of the process. And so they're coming up the way they did. They were kind of ingrained, integrated into the system. So just having a, really close, there's not a lot of, the veil's been pulled back, we'll say, for them. So they kind of understand more of what we're doing, how we're doing it.
Right.
Versus I think the traditional, probably most of the relationships within our system, as far as new gang goes, are probably a little more, general contractor, owner.
Yeah.
And I'm doing this for you.
You guys have grown together.
Yeah, I feel like they're, like Nick, it's like, I mean, he's actually an officer of my corporation now. So I think I told you about that. Because of the value that he brings.
Right.
It's really important to me that he, understands that too. Like it's more than just, that's my general contractor.
Yeah. So what's your primary role on a project now?
I would just call it light project management. I'm definitely not out like I used to be. In proximity too, like we're doing projects that are a little bit
wider
further.
geographically.
Yeah, a little bit. I tend to buy houses based on where Nick's location is, not mine.
Right.
So, all the ones, they're all within probably 45 minutes of him versus being 45 minutes from me.
Yeah.
I think that distance is about as far as you really want to be doing on a daily basis.
Right.
But some of them are spread.
So how many days a week are you on site at a particular construction project?
I probably do a couple drive-bys a week.
Okay.
Typically.
Yeah. So that's a big change from when you first started. You were there every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And the geography of where you are
Mm-hmm.
is a change from where you used to be, from Southern California to Lewisburg, Tennessee. This is you're doing all this in a pretty rural area, right? It's outside Nashville, but Lewisburg's pretty rural.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if it's the whole county or whatever. It's something like 13,000. So.
Yeah.
And then you got Columbia, which is 25 minutes from us, which is where we really started doing most of our flips.
Yeah.
Early on, there's I think 30 or 40,000, maybe a little more. Now.
They're small towns compared to.
They're small towns, yeah. But although I will say, where I grew up in California, where I really grew up, we had 25,000 people in the town. But it was, there was a lot around us, so it wasn't small like out here.
Yeah.
For sure.
But you prefer, like, you've gravitated to the rural areas.
I'm still trying to find a piece of property where there's. I love people. I just don't want anybody up in my business.
You spend 2 days a week at each drive-bys at a project. How many days a week are you on Broadway in Nashville?
Never. I don't go. I don't.
That would have been my guess.
Yeah, everybody knows that I do not want to go to Nashville. I've been there too much this last couple of weeks because my daughter had been picking her up at the airport multiple times.
As close as you want to get.
Yeah, that's it. Everybody wants to come from Nashville, and I'm like, I grew up near L.A. and having to drive to L.A. for work and stuff, and I'm like, why would I want to subject myself to that?
That's the madness you were escaping, right?
It's a mini microcosm of what LA was like.
Yeah, man, downtown Nashville is bananas.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah. Well, man, let's talk about this house because you've done a lot of projects now, but this one's a pretty cool one. Like it is it's got land around it. Yeah. Like I've looked at the drone photos and it's like really pretty.
It's a very rural spot for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which brought the challenges. Yeah.
Right. And so it's an old farmhouse, right? Is that built what in the 40s probably?
Probably around the time our house that we lived, because we had a house that we renovated and moved into down there, and I'd say they're probably born. I think they were probably built around the same year. I think it was 42 or something like that. Yeah. So it's an old farmhouse. Yeah.
Yeah. So
no bathroom originally.
You did this is a cool project. You guys did a really good job on this. Thanks. on this house, and so but talk me through it. Like you walk, you see a house like this. Right, we're talking about what, a 1,300 square foot, 1,400 square foot farmhouse, beautiful setting, but this thing needs a lot. Like, where does your mind go to as soon as you walk on the property? Are you automatically seeing what this thing can be, or are you focusing on the problems that have to be fixed?
Both, always.
Yeah.
Yeah, our pastor always says, he talks about things like that you can do or not do or whatever, so you have to make a choice. It's not a choice. It's both.
It's both and not either or.
Right. So we do both and, you know, and we get paid to solve problems, right?
Yeah.
We talk about that all the time. So I was really, I had a lot of, is it trepidation?
Yeah, that's a word.
Trepidation. Yeah, I think that's a word.
That's the most syllables that's ever been used on this.
Right. I didn't graduate high school. Okay, that's another part of my story. But so I knew. Actually, I didn't think about the well, to be honest with you, until way later in the process. I knew we were going to have to work on checking the septic out and stuff like that. Well, we went through part of the process. I got the septic inspected. And then I told the guy, I'll eat the inspection if I don't make an offer or whatever, I'll eat it. I don't care, whatever. But I want to make sure we don't have a problem. So we kind of got through that process. And then I realized as we got closer to putting a deal together, this deal took months.
Yeah.
I was like, wait a second, there's a well. I think we were actually under contract.
And you found out it's a well.
And I was like, there's a well. Yeah, wait, of course there's a well. I mean, this thing is in the middle of nowhere. So he's like, yeah, I told you. And I'm like, you probably did. Yeah, like, that's on me. Okay.
Yeah.
So I said, but I still can't buy the house without doing some due diligence. And so then we found out not only was it a well, but it was a shared well.
Mm.
And, so it just snowballed from there.
But these are problems that you see as opportunities. Like,
Correct.
a lot of people would see these as problems as like,
right.
reasons not to
Right.
do something.
Right.
But in this business, like, every one of those problems is an opportunity to add value.
And I'm sure you read Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah.
And there's a story in there where they bought a house and it had a bad well.
Mm.
I don't know if you remember that.
I remember it, yeah.
But they bought a house and it had a bad well, and I don't know if I think they had to abandon the well, and they dug a new well for like $3,000 or whatever.
Yep.
And then the house, they sold it and made a ton of money on it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I remember thinking, okay, I just got to figure out how to mitigate, any major issues with this. So I just started making calls. Eric Wilkening was awesome
Yep.
because he's done a lot of well
Yep.
stuff. So I just started getting information, and the first thing was it was sulfur. It passed the bacteria test and all that. The guy, matter of fact, this is not best practice, but I never had that bacteria test done. The owner told me he had it tested, and that there was no problem with that. It was sulfur though, and I believed him.
Yeah.
And I took him for his word.
Yeah.
Not very often do I
Yeah.
do that, but this guy I trusted.
Yeah.
I could tell he was. He still owns the property next door.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I called him up. I said, or actually I talked to him here at the conference, and he said, you got to get this filter system. Okay. Which is ultimately what we ended up getting. And then I did all this other due diligence, and then Derek Malcolm, of course, got involved and helped drop a shared well agreement because there was none. And then we had to get the other owners of the property that was sharing the well to sign off on that. So we did. And then we found out that the septic lines were also on the property of the seller that he still owned. So we had to get an easement for that. So we did all this due diligence before we finally closed on the property. That way, when we went to sell it to somebody, it was all done.
Yeah.
And if they would bring something up, we would be like, that's already handled.
Yeah.
And the sale went just like that. Matter of fact, at the end, there was like a day before closing, and they said, hey, we need a survey. Well, we had a survey. So I just shot the survey over to them, and I never heard anything else.
Yeah.
We just closed.
Yeah.
It was great.
So this house, there's a well problem that has to be solved. That's an opportunity. When you walk in this particular house, what else do you see?
Well, the comps that brought the most money were 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. And for us to get close to what we thought we needed to get, we needed to add a bathroom.
Okay. So it was a 3-1.
Yeah, otherwise we just didn't feel we could break the ceiling that we needed to offer him enough that he would be happy.
Yeah. So you go in and you figure out you have to add a bath.
Yeah.
It's a small house, and you got to rob Peter to pay Paul. So what do you take? What do you take to make the bath? What space?
Yeah, there was the same place they built the original bathroom, which is the back porch that got finished out.
Okay.
Because that's what they did with all these old houses. Our house does the exact same thing.
Yep.
So it was pretty cool because our house was like the blueprint almost of what we did, including taking some of the ceiling up because it had this really, really short ceiling in this space.
Yep.
Well, there was a vaulted area, so we opened it up so that it didn't feel so closed in. And it came out. The bathroom came out really, really good.
Yeah. And you created a lot of value with that second bath.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the other biggest thing for this house was it had that 1,500 square foot shop.
Oh, right.
With
Yeah,
a
the big garage.
Beautiful concrete floor. Did I get too close? Beautiful concrete floor in it. It had another bathroom in it. So we did a little bit of work to that bathroom, very little, but just wanted to make it more usable for, whoever ended up buying the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
The
came out cool.
kitchen looks great.
Yeah, that was.
Do you design that?
The kitchen that was original cabinets. So we refinished them with paint, and I think we put butcher block countertops on them, and which it was a country feeling house to begin with, and we did like a green color, whatever, with a kind of a flowery backsplash, which we would never do, but I just for some reason I was like, I think it'll be cool in this house for, being a country style house.
You've got a wife and a daughter. Do you get to make these choices?
Most of the time.
Wow.
Well, we collaborate, but I have strong opinions. It's hard for me to let that go too sometimes, but
yeah, I have strong opinions in my house full of women, and opinions don't get a whole lot of attention.
It doesn't go over well sometimes, but no, but it works out pretty good. Like, and honestly, like this one of the houses we just finished, like I just told Lisa, sometimes I just do it in expedience. Yeah. Like sometimes I just make a decision. I don't tell anybody. I just go on. And so I told Lisa, I said, hey, we need backsplash for this one house. And I had 4 other things on my table, and I said, just pick the backsplash.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I already had something, and she literally picked the same thing I picked. In my mind.
There you go.
So I was like, okay, well, we're on the same page.
Yeah.
It's all good.
The curb appeal on this is great. Like the before and afters on the exterior, and it looks great, man. Like
thanks.
You change the porch.
Not much.
Structure.
A little bit.
Structure posts. Okay.
And we just dolled up the new shutters, and it actually, I mean, honestly, the blueprint kind of for that house was ours because it had a very similar style in the front. So the house we live in now, we did very similar. Like you would think like it's its little brother or cousin or something. Yeah. So it was kind of easy. Like I'm kind of a one-trick pony in a lot of ways. Like go with what works. Yeah. People drive by our house sometimes, stop and go, "We love your house. It's beautiful." Okay. If people like it, then let's do something like that. Yeah.
Well, it works. It worked on this one because it looks really great. Super beautiful setting, and it sold pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, it didn't take too long.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had concerns, because you're going to have people that will be concerned about a well, concerned about that haven't done that before or been through that, and so I mean, how many buyers have, right? So that was the biggest concern for me going in, and I knew if we could make those problems less of a problem for people, that it would go smooth. Yeah, and it did. So
yeah, man, you did great work on this. So what's next? Like, what is the next year? What does the next year hold?
I've been praying a lot about it.
Yeah,
and I keep just getting. Get uncomfortable. Like I have a saying on my desk. It says nothing changes unless you're willing to get uncomfortable. And last year I got uncomfortable, and things changed in a really good way. 5-6 years ago, when we were moving to Tennessee, it was all about getting uncomfortable. I mean, it's probably the best decision we ever made in our lives. Yeah, based off current results. Right. So a lot of stuff happened in the last 5 years, as you know, because you've been a big part of it. Yeah. No, it's been really cool to see you build this, and looking forward to what the next chapter of being uncomfortable takes you. But man, you got a lot of exciting projects on the table. So I don't know we don't know what it's going to be. I know it's not going to be boring. Because you got a lot I think I told you going on. Nick mentioned, you want to build an apartment building? I'm like, okay. I mean, I don't know. Let's call Matt and see if he wants to set up new again apartments, right? We could go there. well, yeah, that would definitely be an interesting 2025. Yeah. Well, thanks for being here, and be proud of that project because that's a really cool.